There's a version of rich that costs $300,000 a year. Private clubs, designer clothes, the kind of car that makes people turn their heads at a red light. And then there's another version of rich, one that most people have never been taught about, that costs a fraction of that. And statistically, the people living that version report higher happiness, less anxiety, and more freedom than most millionaires. This isn't about couponing your way through life or eating ramen in the dark. This is about understanding a psychological trick that luxury brands have spent billions of dollars trying to hide from you. Because the moment you understand it, their power over you disappears. In the 1970s, a psychologist named Philip Brickman ran a study that the financial industry really didn't want going mainstream. He compared lottery winners to people who had become paralyzed in accidents. Within about a year of either event, the windfall or the tragedy, both groups reported roughly the same levels of day-to-day happiness. He called it hedonic adaptation, the fancy term for you get used to things. That new car smell fades. The bigger apartment starts feeling normal. The $14 cocktail stops tasting special after the third one. Your brain recalibrates, resets its baseline, and goes right back to wanting more. This is the treadmill that consumer culture is built on. They don't just want you to buy things. They want you in a permanent state of almost satisfied, because that's where the spending happens. But here's the flip side, and this is the part nobody talks about. Hedonic adaptation works both ways. When people voluntarily simplify their lives, not out of desperation, but by design, they adapt downward just as quickly. And what replaces the hunger for stuff? Something researchers call savoring. You start actually tasting your coffee again. A walk in the park hits differently. A home-cooked meal becomes an event. The rich life isn't about having more. It's about noticing more. So what does this actually look like in practice? Let's break it into 3 pillars. Pillar 1, spend like a sniper, not a shotgun. Most people's spending is scattered. A subscription here, a delivery fee there, an impulse buy they'll forget about by Thursday. It adds up, and worse, none of it delivers lasting satisfaction. The frugal rich flip this completely. They cut everything that's just noise, the stuff they pay for on autopilot without thinking, and they redirect that money into a handful of things that genuinely light them up. Maybe that's one really good restaurant meal per month instead of 4 mediocre ones. Maybe it's a weekend trip twice a year instead of constant, forgettable little splurges. The amount spent can actually be lower, but the satisfaction is exponentially higher. That's not frugality, that's curation. Pillar 2, buy time, not things. Research from Harvard Business School found that people who spend money on time-saving purchases, a cleaning service, grocery delivery, outsourcing something tedious, report higher life satisfaction than people who spend the same money on material goods. Now, the frugal version of this isn't about paying for convenience at every turn. It's about identifying where your time is genuinely being drained and making surgical investments there. Meanwhile, you're protecting the time you already have by eliminating the maintenance costs of too much stuff. A smaller home, fewer possessions, less weight. Pillar 3, engineer your environment for free pleasure. This one sounds abstract until you actually do it. The happiest frugal people aren't white-knuckling their way through deprivation. They've built a life that's genuinely enjoyable at a low cost. They have a park they love, a library card they use obsessively, a group of friends they actually like eating dinner with at home, a skill, cooking, gardening, music, that keeps deepening. These aren't consolation prizes for not having money. In study after study, experiences tied to mastery, connection, and nature rank higher for well-being than almost any consumer purchase. The frugal rich didn't settle. They got there first. Here's where it gets concrete. The average American spends roughly $1,500 to $2,000 a month on what financial researchers call lifestyle inflation, upgrades they made when their income grew that they no longer consciously notice. Housing that's bigger than they need. A car payment on a vehicle that's more status symbol than transportation. Subscriptions that auto-renew into infinity. Now imagine pulling just half of that back. Deliberately. Not through suffering, through the redesign we just talked about. That's $750 to $1,000 a month redirected. At a 7% average annual return in an index fund, that's over $500,000 in 20 years. From spending you won't even miss. This is what separates frugal rich from just frugal. The point was never to hoard. The point is that when you stop leaking money into things that don't matter to you, you suddenly have more than enough for the things that do, and you're building actual wealth in the background. You're not living like you're poor. You're living like you're paying attention. Here's the real reason most people can't do this, even when they understand it logically. Spending is tied to identity. What you wear, what you drive, where you eat, what phone you carry. These are signals. And the deepest fear underneath most lifestyle inflation isn't really about comfort. It's about how you'll appear if you stop spending the way people expect. What behavioral economists call social comparison theory essentially says, we don't evaluate our lives in a vacuum. We evaluate them against other people. And we've been handed a very specific comparison group, one manufactured by advertising, social media, and the spending habits of people who are also, quietly, broke. The shift that frugal rich people make isn't just financial. It's about choosing your reference group. When you stop comparing yourself to the person with the new car and start comparing yourself to the person with actual freedom, no alarm clock, no financial anxiety, no job they can't afford to leave, the entire calculus changes. Frugality stops feeling like sacrifice. It starts feeling like the obvious move. So what's the actual definition of a rich life? Not a number in a bank account, not a zip code, not a brand on the back of your shirt. It's waking up and having choices. It's not dreading Monday because you've built something that doesn't depend on impressing strangers. It's a quiet security that doesn't require performance. The frugal path to that life isn't a detour. For most people, it's the only road that actually gets there. Everything else is just expensive noise.